Hello, Internet. Welcome to another episode of Quiz and Hers, the podcast where we test each other's knowledge and the strength of our relationship in a 10-week battle for trivia supremacy. My name is Justin, and I am here with my best friend, who for the next 2 weeks will be my bitter enemy as we finish up the season, my fiancée, Hallie.
Hello.
Currently, I am leading 13-12 with one game left to go for each of us. So I will be the quiz master today, which means that I will be asking Hallie 6 questions, one from each of our 6 categories, which are history, geography, science, arts and literature, sports and games, and sounds and screen. Those 6 questions will also be connected by a central theme, and after each question, I will have a short discussion prepared so that we can all learn a bit more about the topic. Hallie, this is your last chance to build up a lead before I get my last licks next episode, so good luck and Godspeed. Are you ready?
Getting in the game.
Okay.
Okay.
Do you need a moment to center your chi?
I got this.
Okay.
I'm going to get them all.
All right.
Redemption.
That would be a first if you were to go 6 for 6. Neither one of us has ever done that.
That's true. It's very hard.
Yeah. All right, here we go. Today's game is called Saints and Winners.
Okay.
Because every question will have something to do with saints, though not necessarily in the Catholic sense of the term.
What is saints and winners?
As opposed to saints and sinners.
Oh, I got it.
That was the joke.
Sorry, I get it now.
So, yes, so it all has to do with saints, although not necessarily Catholic saints, and that will make sense once we jump in.
Like, whatever, just go on.
Okay. All right, question 1. Arts and literature. What Robin Hood-esque protagonist of a series of stories and novels by Leslie Charteris, who has been portrayed by, among others, Vincent Price, Roger Moore, and Val Kilmer, goes by the alias The Saint? Hallie's making a very confused face. I don't think she's going to go 6 for 6.
I'm thinking.
Okay.
See, this is the problem. Sometimes I just need to think, but then there's awkward silence. Justin just spilled tea all over his leg.
It's water, but...
Oh, good. I was concerned, but you seemed okay.
Take your time. I can cut out the awkward silence.
Okay, thanks. Would you say Val Kilmer, Vincent Price?
And Roger Moore.
Oh, he's James Bond, but no, it's not James Bond. Hold on. I'm sorry, I'm trying to think of at least a guess here. I don't know.
Okay. You give up?
I guess.
All right. The answer, character's name, is Simon Templar.
Oh, that sounds vaguely familiar. I just feel less bad about not knowing now, because I'm not sure who that is.
Yeah, he comes up in, trivia every once in a while. I think there's been a Jeopardy question about him relatively recently.
Not that recently, because I just watched the last, 4 weeks.
No, I mean, a few months back, I think.
Oh, okay. I forgot.
Anyway, yeah, Simon Templar. So, Leslie Charteris, the author, was born Leslie Charles Bowyer Yin on May 12, 1907 in Singapore, which was, at the time, a British possession, and was educated in England. His father was Chinese, and his mother was English. That'll come up again in a moment. And he is known today almost exclusively for his character Simon Templar, aka the Saint. The Saint was introduced in his 3rd novel, Meet the Tiger, published in 1928, though later in life Charteris repudiated this book, stating that the only value it had was in kicking off the series. He even went so far as to say that the Saint series really started with the 2nd book, a collection of 3 novellas called Enter the Saint, published in 1930. Charteris moved to the United States in 1932, where he continued to publish short stories and also wrote screenplays. However, he was not granted permanent resident status because the Chinese Exclusion Act prohibited immigration by anyone who was 1/2 East Asian or more.
Oh.
They use the term Oriental, of course. So he had to continually renew his 6-month temporary visa until a goddamn act of Congress personally exempted him and his daughter from the law.
Wait, where was he?
He was in California.
Oh, okay. Jeez.
Yeah, so he was born in Singapore, educated in England, moved from England to California.
So he was a citizen of Singapore or England, or it doesn't matter because he was half Asian?
Singapore was a part of Great Britain at the time.
Oh, okay.
It was a British possession.
So it just mattered that he was half Asian, not where he was from.
Correct.
That's stupid.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, all of that is stupid.
Yeah.
But, yes. So he had to continually renew his 6-month temporary visa for years until he became such a successful novelist that Congress exempted him from this rule and allowed him to immigrate permanently.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Wait, Congress did it just for him, or they did it for, like...
Him and his daughter.
Wow, that's funny.
Yeah. He eventually returned to England late in life, and he died on April 15th, 1993, 85 years old. He spent 55 of those 85 years writing or overseeing works about the saint from 1928 to 1983, one of the longest spans by a single author in all of mystery fiction, on par with Agatha Christie.
Cool.
In those 55 years, he wrote 14 novels, 34 novellas, and 94 short stories starring Simon Templar,
wow.
and oversaw the writing of an additional 7 novels and 14 novellas by other authors.
I feel like I probably should have read this, or at least heard of this.
Yeah, so I haven't read any of them. I've heard of it, though. I'll talk a little bit about why I think this character probably isn't super well known anymore.
Okay.
Yeah, but first I'll talk about the character himself. So, Simon Templar is a roguish anti-hero who steals from and sometimes flat-out murders villainous characters, taking a 10% collection fee to support himself, and distributing the rest of the boodle to charities or to his victims' own prior victims.
The rest
boodle,
of the... Yeah, okay, go on.
Boodle being the Dutch slang term he prefers for the money he steals.
How do you spell boodle?
B-O-O-D-L-E. Exactly like it sounds.
I like it.
In the early books, he clashed with drug smugglers, arms dealers, and what we would now call human traffickers, and his activities were explicitly illegal. Later, he became a sometimes official, sometimes unofficial ally of law enforcement and intelligence agencies, taking on the Nazis and later communism. Regardless of who he is up against, the Saint often leaves a calling card, a picture of a sassy-looking stick figure with a halo over its head.
Okay.
The character also apparently doesn't age, remaining in his late 20s as the world changes around him, sort of like James Bond.
Yeah, this whole thing reminds me of James Bond.
Yeah. We haven't seen much of this character lately, but the Saint was very popular and has been adapted into other media numerous times, including 14 feature films, 19 made-for-TV movies, 2 TV series, and 7 radio series. Some of the more notable adaptations include an American radio serial in the 1950s, in which Simon was played by noted art collector and amateur gourmet cook Vincent Price. I didn't make that up.
Okay.
A TV series starring future James Bond, Roger Moore, which ran from 1962 to 1969, and a feature film from 1997 starring Val Kilmer. The most recent attempt to revive the franchise was a 2013 TV pilot, which Moore himself produced and cameoed in, but which was not picked up as a series and ultimately aired as a one-off TV movie.
Who was in it?
Who played Templar? It was some TV actor. I didn't recognize the name.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. As popular as the Saint was, he strikes me as a character whose time has passed. I think people now would just see him as sort of a low-rent James Bond, but I guess you never know. Even though his publication history predates James Bond by a good couple of decades. Yeah, I think people would just say this is like a weird knockoff James Bond if they tried to bring the character back again. But you never know, I guess.
Yeah.
Question 2. Geography. Referred to by locals as Twin City, Love City, and Rock City, respectively, the islands of St. Croix, St. John, and St. Thomas are all located in what Caribbean archipelago?
I should know this. I've been there.
This one you should know.
I've been there. Cayman Islands? No. I'm taking it back.
Okay.
Oh, I feel like it starts with a C. Say the islands again?
St. Croix, St. John, St. Thomas.
I don't know.
Okay. You're going to kick yourself.
I'm just going to say Cayman Islands.
It's not the Cayman Islands.
I know.
It's the Virgin Islands. Specifically the United States Virgin Islands. I also would have accepted the Leeward Islands or the Lesser Antilles for reasons I'll get into in a moment.
Okay.
Yeah, you should have gotten that one.
Probably.
Alright, so I've always found the geographic terms in this part of the world confusing.
Me too, that's why I didn't think of it.
And as I was researching this, I figured out why. It's because the geography in the Caribbean is like a fucking Russian nesting doll. Every sub-region has another one inside it, seemingly forever. So let's talk about that. Starting at the highest level. The observable universe is about 93 billion light years across.
Okay.
No, I'm kidding.
Let's start with Caribbean.
Yes. The Caribbean Basin contains territory belonging to 18 different sovereign nations. Traditionally called the West Indies, the region consists of the Antilles and the Lucayan Archipelago, which is mostly the Bahamas, but also includes the Turks and Caicos Islands, which belong to the UK. So that's the Lucayan Archipelago, the Bahamas and Turks and Caicos. The Antilles, in turn, consists of the Greater Antilles, which are the larger islands of Cuba, Jamaica, Puerto Rico, and Hispaniola, as well as the Caymans, and the Lesser Antilles. The Lesser Antilles further subdivide into three smaller regions: the Leeward Antilles, the Windward Islands, and the Leeward Islands.
Hey.
The Leeward Antilles are just north of Venezuela and
Aruba.
they include the Dutch ABC islands of Aruba, Bonaire, and Curacao, and a bunch of Venezuelan islands. The Windward Islands are to the east of the Leeward Antilles and arc around in a northwesterly direction. They contain Dominica, Barbados, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Grenada, Trinidad and Tobago, and Martinique, which is part of France. The Leeward Islands continue that northwesterly arc and consist of St. Kitts and Nevis, a crapload of minor European islands, and, finally, the Virgin Islands. Those subdivide again, and I'll get to that in a second, but first, a brief digression into nautical terminology. There's a point to this, I promise.
Leeward something.
Yes. So until the age of aviation, the only way to get to the Caribbean was by ship. In nautical parlance, windward means toward or in the direction of the source of the wind, essentially sailing into the wind. Whereas leeward means the opposite direction. You have the wind behind you. In the Caribbean, the prevailing trade winds blow from the southeast. Hence, the islands that jut out to the southeast are the Windward Islands, and the islands to the northwest are the Leeward Islands. That's how you can keep them straight.
Okay.
Okay.
If you're aware of which way the wind blows in the Caribbean.
Well, that's all you need to remember, is that it blows from the southeast. You don't
Okay.
have to remember which islands are which. You just need to know the wind.
Oh, I see.
You can work out the rest on a map or in your head then.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is why the Windward Islands are southeast and the Leeward Islands are northwest. Right. So, the Virgin Islands. They were named by Christopher Columbus after Saint Ursula and the 11,000 Virgins. I don't know what that is, but it sounds weird.
Oh, I forgot about this whole theme.
Yeah.
There's the connection.
Well, the connection in the question was St. Thomas, St. Croix,
Oh,
St.
true.
John.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Two connections.
Yeah.
Saint Ursula?
St. Ursula and the 11,000 Virgins.
Oh, okay.
I have no idea what that is.
Me neither.
The Virgin Islands are further subdivided into the British Virgin Islands, the United States Virgin Islands, and the Puerto Rican or, quote, Spanish Virgin Islands, which are also called the Passage Islands, and which are, of course, also part of the U.S. by virtue of being part of Puerto Rico. The British Virgin Islands are a British overseas territory with their capital at Roadtown. The United States Virgin Islands are an insular area of the U.S., which just means that they're U.S. territory that is neither a state nor part of the District of Columbia. More specifically, they are an organized, unincorporated territory. Organized means that they have their own territorial government recognized by Congress, and unincorporated means that the U.S. Constitution does not apply in the territory in the way that it does in the states. Their territorial capital is Charlotte-Amalie, located on St. Thomas.
I'm confused. Which islands are U.S. and which islands are British, or is it like parts of each island?
No. So part of the archipelago is United States, and part of the archipelago is Great Britain.
Well, like which islands are the U.S. and which islands are Great Britain?
So the major U.S. islands are the ones from the question: St. Croix, St. John, and St. Thomas.
Okay, so those all belong to the
Those
US.
are all the U.S., yeah.
And what about the British ones?
I don't have that written down here, which ones are which the British ones are.
Okay.
Yeah. More interesting to me than the specific islands is, like, the way that they're organized and unincorporated. I just find that kind of interesting, because, like, so the U.S. Virgin Islands is an organized, unincorporated territory. Guam, the Northern Mariana Islands, and Puerto Rico are also organized and unincorporated, so that means that they're not states, but they have their own governments recognized by Congress. American Samoa is unorganized and unincorporated, which means that they don't have a congressionally recognized local government. They're actually overseen by the Department of the Interior.
Oh.
So I find that all kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Anyway, that discussion was a little dry, but it was also, I think, the first purely geography discussion we've ever had. And I think this stuff is useful to know.
Okay.
I mean, not useful. Nothing on this podcast is useful, but, you know, it seems
Trivia useful.
Seems worth knowing for quizzing purposes, yes.
Sure.
Okay. Question 3. History. What woman, who pretty much single-handedly founded the Catholic parochial school system in the United States, is the namesake of universities located in New Jersey and Pennsylvania, and was canonized in 1975, making her the first American-born Catholic saint? You should know this because it just came up when we were playing Trivial Pursuit with my parents not long ago.
I just want to say Mother Teresa, but I always just want to say Mother Teresa. It's always Mother Teresa. I'm thinking.
First American-born Catholic saint.
It's not Mother Teresa?
Is that your answer?
Sure.
No. You should know this one because we did just hear this question. I had already written...
What's her name?
Elizabeth Ann Seton.
Oh, Seton Hall.
Yeah. So I had already written this game before we went to visit my parents last week, and then we were playing Trivial Pursuit, and this came up, and I was like, oh shit, do I need to rewrite this question?
And then you were like, no, there's no way Hallie's
like,
going to
nah.
remember this. And you were right.
Well, so Elizabeth Ann Bailey was born on August 28th, 1774, in what was then the British colony of New York, to a prominent physician and his wife. Even in her youth, she spent a lot of time working with the poor and doing charitable work. Oh, and somewhat surprisingly for a Catholic saint, her family wasn't actually Catholic.
Oh.
She was raised in what we now call the Episcopal Church, which was at the time the colonial branch of the Church of England. In 1794, she married William Maggie Seton at the age of 19, taking his last name and becoming Elizabeth Ann Seton, a name which would become famous. Throughout their marriage, William suffered from tuberculosis, and in 1803 they traveled to Italy, hoping that the warmer Mediterranean climate would improve his health. It didn't. He died that same year.
I mean,
yeah,
warmth isn't like a known cure for tuberculosis or anything, so...
Correct. But it was on this trip to Italy that Elizabeth was first introduced to Roman Catholicism, and she was formally received into the Catholic Church in 1805. She moved to Emmitsburg, Maryland in 1809, where she founded St. Joseph's Academy and Free School, a school for Catholic girls. Shortly after, she founded the Sisters of Charity of St. Joseph's, the first congregation of religious sisters in the United States, aka nuns.
You think it was like those schools where like the nuns would beat the students?
I suspect that students were getting beaten in a lot of schools, not just Catholic schools back then.
That's true, but I bet the nuns did. Were they the schools where the nuns were the teachers and they...
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So the Sisters of Charity of St. Joseph's ran the first free Catholic school in America. This would turn out to be the beginning of the American Catholic parochial school system. Keep in mind, there were not even a whole lot of Catholics in the U.S. at this point. Nonetheless, Mother Seton, as she came to be known, spent the rest of her life leading and growing the Sisters of Charity. She died on January 4th, 1821, just 46 years old.
Wow.
Just 9 years later, though, the sisters were operating Catholic schools all across the still young nation, and even established the first hospital east of the Mississippi River, located, appropriately enough, in St. Louis.
Why is that appropriate? Oh, because it's a saint.
Because it's named for a saint.
Aren't you lucky getting all these saints into all these questions?
This game is packed to the gills with its theme. Yeah.
I see.
In 1850, the Sisters of Charity merged with the Daughters of Charity of St. Vincent de Paul, a French group. This had actually been Seton's intention all along, but the U.S. had embargoed France during her lifetime on account of the Napoleonic Wars. As I mentioned, there are two different universities named for Seton. Seton Hall College, now known as Seton Hall University, was founded in South Orange, New Jersey by Bishop James Roosevelt Bailey, a nephew of Seton's.
Oh.
The Seton Hill Schools, now known as Seton Hill University.
That's confusing.
Yep, was founded by the Sisters of Charity in 1885 in Greenburgh, Pennsylvania. So Seton Hall is to New Jersey as Seton Hill is to Pennsylvania. If you can think of an easy mnemonic device to keep that straight, let me know.
I already knew Seton Hall was in New Jersey, so I'm good.
Well, there you go. 142 years after her death in 1963, she was beatified by Pope John XXIII. Essentially, beatification is what has to happen before canonization, which is what it's called when someone is officially made a saint. Seton was canonized in 1975 by Pope Paul VI, making her the first American-born saint. Her feast day is January 4th, And she is the patron saint of widows, which makes sense, and seafarers, which I don't really understand.
She's almost my birthday saint. That's a thing, right? In Catholicism.
I don't know. I'm
Having
not
a
Catholic.
birthday saint.
I'm not Catholic. I don't know.
Well, anyway, she's almost my birthday saint.
Okay. Yeah, I find it odd that she's the patron saint of seafarers. You'd think it would be teachers or something.
Yeah.
But no, she's the patron saint of widows, which makes sense, and seafarers.
Well, teachers was probably taken already.
Possibly. Although some things do have multiple patron saints, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, I don't know.
Anyway.
You're the one writing an episode about saints.
Yeah, well, but like all our episodes, it's really a general knowledge quiz in disguise, so.
I know.
Yeah. Okay. Ready for question 4?
Yes.
All right. Sports and games. Depending on how you count, there are about 7 major football codes. That is, sports that share a common ancestry and are called football of some kind, such as soccer and rugby.
If you make me name them all, I'll be really... Okay, sorry.
Worldwide, there are 7 top-level professional football leagues, in the broad sense, with teams nicknamed the Saints. Name any 2 of these leagues other than the NFL. So there are 6 options. I need 2 of them.
The Australian Football League. Correct.
The St. Kilda Football Club are
that's
called
one.
the Saints. Yep. So that's 1. I need 1 more.
This is evil.
This is a coin flip question. I think you can get this, actually.
The Rugby League.
What rugby league? There's a lot of them.
The American Rugby League.
Is that your answer?
Sure.
No. If you had to guess a football league that would have a team name that's an English word, you could do worse than guessing the top-level professional soccer league in England, which is the Premier League.
Or the American Rugby League, or the Canadian Football League. They all speak English.
Well, you know the Canadian Football League doesn't, because you know enough about Canadian football to know that there are no Saints in that league.
I know, but I picked the wrong thing. It's not like I made some stupid decision. I didn't know.
Okay.
Your questions are too hard, but it's fine, because next week I'll just give you really hard questions.
So, the 6 possible answers, you got one of them, the Australian Football League, which is an Aussie rules league. They have the St. Kilda Football Club, nicknamed the Saints. The other 5 options are Aviva Premiership Rugby, that's an English rugby union. They have the Northampton Saints. The Super League, which is a European rugby league. They have the St. Helens Rugby Football Club. The Scottish Professional Football League, which is a soccer league, obviously, has the St. Johnstone Football Club. And the League of Ireland Premier Division, which is an Irish soccer league, has the St. Patrick's Athletic Football Club.
So I could have said any of these things, and they all have Saints, and I picked the one that doesn't.
Yep. And the Premier League, which is the top level of the English Football League, has the Southampton Football Club, a.k.a. the Saints.
That's what I was going to say.
You should have.
That's what I meant.
Yeah, okay.
What if I just said the English Rugby League?
No.
Okay, fine.
So, the 7 major football codes are American football, Canadian football, Australian rules football, association football, aka soccer, Gaelic football, rugby union, and rugby league. The history and rules of any of these sports could warrant its own discussion, but I think it's interesting to see them all in the context of their shared history. For the most part, they descend from ball games played at elite British boarding schools like Eton, Rugby, and Winchester.
The school was called Rugby?
Yes. You can guess which codes descend from the game played at Rugby.
Yeah. Interesting.
And these ball games that were played at these schools, in turn, had their roots in mob football, which was a lawless game played by entire towns.
Fun.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Mob football is insanity.
It sounds funny.
These games roughly fell into 2 types: running or carrying games and kicking games. So the oldest modern code is actually Aussie rules football.
It's older than soccer?
Yes.
Huh.
Australian cricketer Tom Wills, who studied at Rugby, brought home the school's rough and tumble carrying game in 1858, establishing the Victoria rules, which developed into today's game. Played on an oval field, it notably features spectacular marks, in which a player jumps up on a teammate's back to catch a kicked ball.
Fun.
I've seen some videos and GIFs of this. It's sick.
That's cool.
Canadian football was the next code to develop, originating at the University of Toronto in 1861. American colleges were playing a kicking game by the early 19th century, but when Harvard played McGill in 1874, they were introduced
When they played in the what?
when Harvard played McGill.
Oh, McGill. I thought you said in the Gill.
No, sorry. When Harvard University played against McGill University,
okay.
which is a Canadian university, in 1874, they were introduced to the rugby-style rules popular in the Great White North and brought them back to the States, marking the point of divergence between the Canadian and American codes. So yeah, Canadian football actually predates American football, though the Canadian game has since adopted many innovations developed in the U.S., most notably down and distance rules, the line of scrimmage, and the forward pass.
But not the field size.
Not the field size and not the number of players. So
Right.
Canadian football's on a larger field and they have 12 to a side instead of 11. Yeah.
Right.
Association football also dates to the 1860s, when the Football Association, a group of football clubs in London, promulgated a set of rules that banned carrying the ball, codifying the kicking games. You know about soccer. I'm not going to say anything.
It's just so interesting that they really are from the same games, but they were just like no touching with your hands, and then that was soccer.
Yeah, so they
so
all descend from like the same loose family of games. The kicking games and the carrying games were played at different schools, and they were a little bit different to begin with. So the carrying games were played at places like rugby, so that's like more like what we think of as like rugby and American football. The kicking games were played at Eton and things like this, and so that was more like what we think of soccer now.
Did they all have a round ball at that point?
At first, yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Rugby was codified by the Rugby Football Union in 1871, which strictly enforced amateurism. Working-class northern clubs left the RFU to form the Rugby Football League, which permitted players to be paid in 1895. Though the schism was about money, the RFL quickly found that as a professional sport, their game had to be more accessible and entertaining for spectators, leading to two distinct codes: the traditional game, Rugby Union, and the faster, more athletic Rugby League. The RFU started allowing player pay in 1995, but the games had diverged so much by then that there was no hope of reunification. They differ in scoring and in the number of players, but the biggest difference is in the possession rules. In Union, the ball is always contested, and a tackled player must release the ball so anyone can scoop it up. In League, a tackle stops play, and possession changes after 6 tackles, similar to American football's 4 downs.
How is that more exciting?
Well, it's more accessible and it's faster.
Easier to follow?
It's easier to follow, and it's a faster, more athletic game.
Oh, okay.
In Union, like, the scoring tends to be very low because you're just constantly tackling people and then they have to get rid of the ball. Like, they have to just let go of it after, like, every time they're tackled.
I see.
And so, like, possession is just changing constantly and
like
there's
soccer.
not a lot of scoring. Sort of, yeah. And yeah, so Rugby League is designed to be a more athletic, higher scoring kind of game.
Okay.
It's more similar to American football than rugby.
Are there a lot of professional like teams and fans and stuff there?
Yeah, it's popular especially in Great Britain.
Okay.
Yeah. Gaelic football spoils this family tree narrative I've been spinning. It doesn't derive from the English school games, but rather from a traditional Irish game called Caid. C-A-I-D. The Gaelic Athletic Association codified it in 1887 to promote traditional Irish sports and reject imported games. It resembles Aussie football enough that games of, quote, international rules football have been played under hybrid rules, though it's played with a round ball on a rectangular pitch. Remember that Aussie rules has an oval ball and an oval pitch.
Okay.
And the historical connection between the two codes is still debated. It's also one of the few sports on Earth that remains fully amateur. Players, coaches, and managers in Gaelic football are not allowed any kind of payment whatsoever.
Cool.
Yep.
So they all just are playing for fun?
Yeah.
Do they have fans and stuff?
Yeah, it's reasonably popular.
Interesting. But, like, do you have to, like, try out? Like, is there some sort of, like, process for becoming a player? Or, like, how do you become a manager if there's no, like, structure?
I mean, there is structure. There's just no payment.
Oh, I see.
So, like, there's a league, the Gaelic Athletic Association.
So these people have to have jobs?
Yeah. They're weekend warriors. They practice and play. They practice after work and they play on the weekends.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And it's tiring.
Yeah.
Like, think of American football players. What do? They wake up, they work out, they go to training. That's like their whole life.
Yep.
Okay, that's all.
Okay. So you're 0 for 4. That's no good.
I know. This is not good.
Question 5. Science. Pope John Paul II proposed that St. Isidore of Seville, a 6th and 7th century scholar who tried to record all human knowledge in his enormous encyclopedia, the Etymologiae, should be the patron saint of what modern invention? Presumably, JP2 couldn't nominate Tim Berners-Lee or Al Gore because they're still alive.
The internet?
Is that your answer?
Yes.
Yes.
Yay!
Saint Isidore of Seville was proposed to be the patron saint of the internet.
That's cool.
Ah, the internet. The remarkable feat of technology that gives us instantaneous access to all of the accumulated knowledge of humanity, which we use to look at pictures of cats, watch videos of sex acts, and listen to podcasters talk about nothing.
And read a lot of Wikipedia.
Yeah. Eric Schmidt, a former CEO of Google, described the internet as the first thing that humanity has built that humanity doesn't understand. The largest experiment in anarchy that we've ever had.
Sounds right.
Yeah. I am just barely old enough to remember life before the internet really blew up. But the history of the internet actually starts well before either one of us was born, in the late 1960s, when the Advanced Research Projects Agency of the Department of Defense developed the eponymous ARPANET, the earliest example of a network of networks, connecting several different university networks together. Prior to this time, exchanges of voice and data used a technology called circuit switching, in which each connection is accomplished by a dedicated point-to-point connection, as in a traditional landline telephone network. ARPANET was the first implementation of packet switching technology, which essentially tags bits of data with their ultimate destination and sends them out over a larger network. Packet switching is one of the fundamental technologies underlying the internet. ARPANET was mostly confined to the US, though the Norwegian seismic array did connect to it via satellite. In 1986, the National Science Foundation launched NSFNet, which provided university researchers with networked access to supercomputers, and expanded internationally when Princeton University connected to Stockholm, Sweden by satellite in 1988. A faster, more stable intercontinental link was established in 1990, when a T1 connection was established between Cornell University,
Woo! Go Red!
and CERN. ARPANET was decommissioned in 1990 as commercial internet service providers were starting to emerge. That same year, Tim Berners-Lee, a CERN employee, pretty much single-handedly invented the World Wide Web, which has become so ubiquitous that we often just call it the internet now, even though it's really only one of several different services on the internet.
Yeah.
Berners-Lee developed the first web browser, the first versions of hypertext markup language, or HTML, which is the basic language that web pages are written in, and the first versions of hypertext transfer protocol, or HTTP, the protocol by which web pages hosted on servers are accessed by clients. He also developed the first web server and the first web pages.
Wow.
Like I said, he really should be made a saint when he dies.
Yeah.
NSFNet was decommissioned in 1995, removing the last barrier to commercialization of internet technology. According to an article in Science, only 1% of two-way exchange of information in 1993 was conducted over the internet. By 2007, that number had grown to 97%.
That's crazy.
It is estimated that 47% of the entire human population use the internet today.
What percent?
47. But that's including, like, infants, right? So, like, infants don't
Okay.
use the internet, so they don't factor into that. Yeah.
I guess a lot of old people also don't.
Correct. And there's very limited internet access in some developing parts of the world, particularly Africa.
Right.
Okay, so just a bit about Saint Isidore. He was the Archbishop of Seville from around 601 until his death in 636. Historians have called him the last scholar of the ancient world because he strove to preserve classical knowledge during what we now call the Dark Ages. The Etymologiae, as its name suggests, prominently features information on word origins, but it also includes entries on, well, basically everything else. It was so popular in the Middle Ages that it was often read in lieu of the classical texts that it summarized, so they were no longer copied, and now survive only in fragmentary quotations in the Etymologiae. So that would be like the works of Shakespeare going out of print now, because high school students just read the Wikipedia synopses, which, yeah, that actually doesn't seem totally implausible, does it?
Mm.
Yeah.
But do people still read this? Like, it's like the first encyclopedia, basically.
It's not the first encyclopedia. There were ancient ones, but it was the information source in the Middle Ages.
I see. It must have been huge. How were they even printing?
Back then, they were copying stuff by hand.
Wow.
So
I would not want to be that guy that was
it was
writing that by hand.
It was monks mostly.
Wow.
But you have to keep in mind also that literacy rates were pretty low back then, so this was not really available to the common people.
Right.
Like, the demand for literature was not nearly as high as it is now. Yeah. Okay, so we're now tied at 13 correct answers apiece. This is your last chance to put up a lead. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, question 6, sounds and screen. The 1988 series finale of what saintly named TV show led to the theory that over 400 different American TV series all exist in the same shared universe, which in turn exists only in the imagination of an autistic boy named Tommy Westfall. So I need the name of the series.
Saint Elsewhere.
Yes.
Yay!
Correct.
I know my TV.
Yes, you do. So, as you probably already guessed, this theory is utter madness, and it's amazing. It all got started when Saint Elsewhere was canceled after 6 seasons. Up to this point, the autistic Tommy Westfall was a minor character, but in the controversial final scene, it was revealed, or at least very heavily implied, that St. Eligius Hospital existed only in a snow globe, and that the taciturn Tommy had imagined the entire series.
Ay.
Now, this would have just been a divisive end to a show that was arguably never as popular as it deserved to be, except St. Elsewhere had crossed over with Cheers in its 3rd season, and 2 characters from the series, Dr. Roxanne Turner and Dr. Victor Ehrlich, later popped up on Homicide: Life on the Street, which was created by St. Elsewhere producer Tom Fontana. Obsessive fans with too much time on their hands, my people,
Yeah.
theorized that this meant that Cheers and Homicide also only exist in Tommy's mind. But as you're already realizing, it doesn't stop there.
Oh,
Frasier spun off from Cheers, and Frasier Crane himself showed up in an episode of Wings.
Mm-hmm.
So those 2 shows must also be figments of Tommy's imagination. And Homicide character John Munch was a regular on Law & Order SVU, which means that Tommy also dreamed up the entire Law & Order universe.
Oh yeah, that seems reasonable.
Including original recipe Law & Order, spin-offs Criminal Intent, Trial by Jury, Law & Order LA, and Law & Order UK, as well as all of Dick Wolf's Chicago series, Chicago Fire, Chicago PD, Chicago Med, and Chicago
the
Justice,
characters.
And the short-lived and incredibly terrible USA series In Plain Sight, all of which have crossed over with various Law & Order series.
Oh my god.
And John Munch also appeared on The X-Files, which convincingly explains why the FBI appears to be so incredibly incompetent in the Law & Order universe. They're too busy covering up alien conspiracies to deal with serial killers in New York.
Oh my god.
And from there, the theory expands exponentially. Connections, some more tenuous than others, have been made between well over 400 TV shows, ranging from I Love Lucy to Doctor Who to both incarnations of Hawaii Five-0. And the implications of this theory are staggering.
No more crossovers, that's it.
Friends takes place in the same version of New York City as Ninja Turtles: The Next Mutation,
No.
meaning that Ross and Joey probably saw Donatello and Raphael battling Shredder outside of Central Perk at some point.
But how does that connect?
Through many, many other shows.
Oh my god.
Star Trek takes place 200 years after Touched by an Angel, meaning that all of the very non-religious characters on Star Trek are absolutely going to hell. Breaking Bad happened 40 years after Adam West's Batman fought crime, meaning that Walter White's blue meth was probably sold on the streets of Gotham City.
Oh yeah.
And on and on and on.
And you know all those shows are connected to this?
Yes, they're all part of the theory.
That's crazy.
Of course, there are numerous objections to the idea that the entirety of American television was dreamed up by a minor character on a moderately successful medical drama. One argument, advanced by Brian Weatherson, who is, I kid you not, a professor of philosophy at Cornell University.
Go Red!
Also, I'm really not doing this on purpose. It's
I know.
just Cornell popped up in a bunch of things that I've been reading about.
We're just very important.
So he argues that just because Tommy dreams someone doesn't mean they don't exist outside the dream. For example, Tommy may have watched Cheers and inserted the characters into his fantasy, explaining the crossover, and he may have actually met the real Drs. Turner and Ehrlich.
True.
A related argument is that people from our world have also appeared on some of these shows. For instance, Alex Trebek appeared as himself on Cheers. So does this mean that our universe was also dreamed up by Tommy Westfall? Are we all just figments of the imagination of the godlike Tommy? Is he daydreaming this podcast right now? Yeah, probably not.
I don't think so. I know they say everything is a simulation, but I don't like that one.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah, I love that theory. It's absolute madness.
Yeah, that's crazy.
All right, so that is the end of this game. So the score is now Hallie 14 and me 13. So I need to get 2 answers out of 6 next week to win the season title outright.
We'll see.
All right. Till then, if you want to get in touch with the show, you can email us at quizandhers@gmail.com, or you can tweet us at quizandhers. If you like what we're doing, subscribe or leave a review on iTunes. That's a thing that podcasters say. I don't really understand, but I think it helps us somehow.
Just do it.
Yeah, I don't really know what it does, but I think it does
Spread
something.
the word.
Yeah. Or just, tell your friends if you like the show. Tell your trivia buddies, your pub trivia team. Until next week, we will say goodbye.
Bye.
"142 years after her death in 1963, she was beatified. All right,
she was what?
I'm going to try that one again. Maybe that's going at the end.